Welcome back to the After School Project. This is a book review on a book by Newport called Deep Work. Now, I read this book for about a month and a half, not because it's a necessarily long book, but because of the depth of knowledge that you gain from it. And it was best for me to read it slowly because of how much it impacted the way I work and the way I go around doing cognitive tasks. So I'm going to divide this into three parts. Firstly, I'm going to define deep work according to Cal Newport. Secondly, I'm going to go through a couple of examples on how to perform deep work and the kind of people who perform deep work and the kind of results and fields they're into. And then thirdly, I'm going to go through his rules or his suggestions for how to get better at deep work. So firstly, Cal Newport defines deep work as a set of cognitively demanding activities that are done in a state of distraction-free concentration. So you can see from this that the key in this book is going to be getting you to be able to work without distractions. Sometimes these distractions can be forced upon us by our environment or our work situation. But often these distractions come in the form of shallow activities that we force upon ourselves by looking at our phones or responding to emails and other things in that manner. So given this definition, what we're aiming for in going through the practices of deep work is to avoid distractions. So let's go through two types of deep work examples that he mentions and the types of people that perform deep work in their line of work. So just a fair warning here, deep work is not for everyone and not all types of deep work can be applicable in all situations. So for example, he starts with an example of deep work called monastery deep work. That's where somebody retreats to a place far away where they cannot be distracted, and they intentionally build that space and time away such that no distractions can come to them while they are working there. This is obviously not for everyone, especially if you're working a job where you can't just up and go at any time where you wish. But secondly, he goes through another example which is a bit more relatable to everyone probably viewing this video, which was relatable to me, which he calls the hybrid model for deep work, which is where you allocate time in your schedule or in your life where you're going to be performing deep work activities, and you build up towards that time by making sure that you cannot be distracted in that time. So let's look at two examples of people who perform deep work in their activities of work. The first famous example is Bill Gates. Bill Gates is known or was known at Microsoft for what he called Think Week, where he goes away to be alone in a remote area with his thoughts, and he packs a lot of books. That's when he does a lot of his reading in these Think Weeks. Obviously, Bill Gates can afford to do that because he's Bill Gates. And we are told he's continued this practice even now that he's no longer working at Microsoft, that he's managing the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. But he can afford that luxury. Unfortunately, a lot of people can't just afford to go away and just think and just read books. But you can allocate spaces in your life and in your schedule where you're able to perform deep work activities. The second example he mentions in the book, and these are examples that are mentioned by Cal Newport, and there are many more examples. The second one is J.K. Rowling, the writer of Fantastic Beasts and the Harry Potter series. He mentions the example that when she was looking to finish the final book of the Harry Potter series, which is Sleeping Hollows, I believe, she went away and booked herself into a hotel where she continued with the work. This worked in two ways. Firstly, she couldn't be distracted because she was working there. So her family had little to no access to her and she could work. But secondly, the luxury of her being there and being conscious that she paid money so that she cannot be distracted helped her focus and get the job done. Now, obviously, this also is not necessarily applicable for everyone that is trying to get better at concentrating and get better at doing deep work. So he mentions 4 rules, or I'll call them 4 suggestions for how to perform or how to incorporate deep work in your life. Firstly, he encourages you to work deeply. So when you are in your sessions where you're working, you need to make sure that you're working deeply and that you are not splitting your focus, or you're not context shifting, as he calls it. So context shifting is when you're focusing on a cognitively demanding activity, but you're constantly switching in between activities and performing other things as well. So you need to learn to focus on one activity and finish that activity, or finish that allocated time with that activity. Secondly, you need to be able to embrace boredom. One of the reasons most people fall back into shallow activities and their mind is not trained for deep work is because they don't embrace boredom. So most of the time when they get bored, they default to the distractions of social media, the distractions of internet browsing, and we've seen many documentaries on such things. But thirdly, you need to be able to drain the shallows out of your life. So if, for example, you are addicted to social media, you can't just quit an app in one day, but you need to wean yourself away from social media. If you're addicted to always just scrolling on the internet and constantly just being online, you need to wean yourself away from that. That means you need to start scheduling yourself time where you're going to be on those activities. If you need to be on social media, you need to decide when you're on social media, unlike social media deciding for you when to be on it. And the last controversial part, which he's most known for, is the suggestion where he says you need to quit social media. And this might not work for some other people. For example, I work in a field where part of my work includes social media, but he lists examples of people who quit social media and the reasons why they quit social media. In fact, some of them even went to the extreme where they don't even use emails at all. That's how unreachable they wanted to be. These are the examples of these people include people who work in places where they're writing editorial work, people who write books. Mostly he speaks about researchers and authors, maybe because he's in that field, but he gives examples of how this boosted their working capabilities, and comparing people from the research, people who practice deep work, and people who are not on social media compared to people whose work enforces them to be on social media. For example, in some news corporations, the reporters or the writers might be forced by company policy to be on social media and interact with the audience for reach and other things like that. But even though most of the suggestions might not be applicable right away to everybody from this book, the ability to schedule time and to work deeply has impacted the way I work, and this is obviously not for everybody. That's why in the definition it speaks of cognitively demanding activities, and if you're performing manual labor, you might do that out of muscle memory. But I recommend that you read this book. It's by Newport. It's called Deep Work, and you can look forward to more book reviews on the channel coming up soon. But another announcement, we're now also available as a podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So you can find us on those if you prefer listening on audio. Also, we're going to be launching a debate and public speaking series on the channel. So look out for that. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. If you're not subscribed, thank you in advance for considering it. Like this video if you found it useful. Comment below if you've read the book or if you've heard of the concept of deep work. Thank you so much.